All right, we got a super interesting interview for you guys tonight. Jamie Mustard. Jamie is an award-winning artist, writer, and consultant known as the Iconist. He graduated from the London School of Economics, and he's got a book, The Invisible Machine, the startling truth about the trauma and the scientific breakthrough that can transform your life. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And I'm also got a book about hopefully what we're going to talk about today, which is Child X, which is behind me.
Yep, I see it.
Yeah.
So So Child X is about your life growing up as a Scientologist, right? So
I mean, yeah.
So you're going to connect it to Trump in a minute, which is going to be interesting. But your whole story is interesting. So tell us about how you grew up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a way you can grow up a Scientologist, or you can grow up inside the Scientology's paramilitary, which is a kind of naval religious organization that runs Scientology. On the day of my birth, I was turned over to Scientology's paramilitary organization and sent to a kind of nursery/orphanage on Beacon Street on the outskirts of downtown Los Angeles in the Rampart Police District.
So wait,
yeah.
So
I can't see you. Yeah, there you are.
Okay. So hold on. Did your parents turn you over, and were your parents not there?
My mother turned me over the day I was born to this kind of slum nursery where I was raised for the first 2.5 years of my life with little to no human touch, and in the most kind of abominable slum conditions you could imagine.
And
not far
why
from
did she
MacArthur
do
Park.
that?
Because she believed that, and still believes, that Scientology is the only thing that can save the planet. In the belief, yeah.
So to this day, she still believes that after all that you went through.
To this day, she still believes that. A couple months ago, there was an article on me in the Daily Mail, and they reached out to the institution in England for comment, and they came back with a declaration from her. And the denials were also admissions. I mean, she said in my book, I say that at 5 years old, I signed a billion-year contract when I was 5 because I didn't learn to write. I couldn't write at the age of 19 when I finally made my first escape. I couldn't write a sentence. So one of her responses in her declaration and the response to the Daily Mail article was, he wasn't 5, he was 7 when he signed that billion-year contract, and it was adorable. So they started grooming me for these beliefs, before I even believed in the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus and I guess the Sandman, or yeah. So it's and it's normalized because it's the only world you know.
So first of all, of course, any contract signed by someone underage, let alone 5 or 7, is not enforceable. It's absurd. You don't have agency. You're not an adult. You can't sign away rights, etc. But was it literally a billion-year contract?
It was literally a billion-year contract, and they lined us all. I was living in kind of like what would be kind of like an orphanage, a military organized slum orphanage where I didn't have bed sheets or underwear, never learned to brush my teeth. I mean, I was basically animalized, and which I can explain later why they would do that. But yeah, they lined us up and they said, we need to handle this planet. And once we handle this planet, we're going to move on and handle the next planet. And so if you want to spend more time with your parents, we need to save Earth. And the best way you can help do that is to commit yourself basically for eternity. The Scientologists believe that you come back lifetime after lifetime, that we are all trillion-year-old fallen gods that are in meat bodies as a degraded state, and that Earth is a prison planet.
Well, the last part seems to have some validity, but okay. So first of all, we're kidding, but then on the other hand, they actually treated you as a prisoner, so they became a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. And now that I know that you live to be trillions of years old, well, then a billion-year contract doesn't seem as onerous. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's no you can't be a child in Scientology. By the time you're 2-3 years old, you're expected to act like an adult. You've lived billions of lives or millions or billions of lives before, so you need to just remember. You're not allowed to exhibit a lot of emotion. Emotion is frowned upon, and you're not a child. You're a trillion-year-old fallen god in a baby body, and that is the viewpoint of all Scientologists.
So, what is this paramilitary group, and what are they supposed to do? Who are they going to invade or defend against, etc.?
In the mid to late 60s, Hubbard was being kicked out of England, losing his big manor estate there that he bought from the Maharaja, a 70-acre estate and manor house that he bought from the Maharaja of Jaipur. And he was so frustrated, he took to the high seas on a fleet of makeshift boats, a converted cattle boat, and maybe a couple of other boats. And he started this thing. I mean, I hate these words, make me sick, but he started this thing called the Sea Organization. And this would be the inner clergy, the religious military clergy, because he had been in the Navy and fancied himself a commander. And this would be the inner clergy that would run Scientology. And he said, whose purpose was, the purpose of the Sea Organization, the paramilitary that raised me, is to get ethics in on the planet.
Okay, what does that mean? What does it mean to get ethics in the planet and to save the planet?
What it means to save the planet is that we all have these kind of subconscious reactive minds that say that are the reason we do all the crazy things in the world. They're the reason that we have conflict in the Middle East. They're the reason people commit crime or murder. They're the reason we need all disease, all accidents. Everything comes because we have these memories in our cells that of pain and unconsciousness. And only through Scientology processing can one systematically remove all of these negative emotions that are below our subconscious and our reactionary mind, or they call it the reactive mind or the subconscious mind. And once you've cleared all of these things out, you create a perfect person that never gets sick, never gets into accidents, can't get disease. And that's what that person, when they've been cleared of all of these kind of pain and unconsciousness going to in utero, that person is called a clear. They're clear of all of their aberrations, and they're basically operating sanely with their mind as a perfect computer.
Okay, do they claim that that's ever actually happened to a single person?
Oh, they do, but I would challenge them to show me one.
Yeah, because I'd like to see the flawless person too. But I'm sure that if you pay them enough money, through the donations, et cetera, that some of the celebrities seem to do, all of a sudden they'll find you pretty clear. So that's my guess. I just wanted to ask. So you said there's a reason why they treated these kids like animals. Why?
I think, it was a question when the book came out that people started asking me a lot. Why would they, if they want you for future labor, wouldn't they want to take good care of you so that you would be a good future soldier for them? And you would think that, but they really do believe that you've lived and seen everything before, so you don't really have to be taught. And you're not really valuable in, one of the things Mr. Hubbard said is that in Scientology, that's a Scientology doctrine, is that production is the basis of morale. How much you can produce is the most important thing in Scientology. So we could not contribute as children. So we needed to be over here in a warehouse or penned, like say you had a prize pig or you had a baby pig. You're not gonna slaughter the pig when it's 20 pounds, you're gonna wait 10 years till it's 500 pounds and you can get value out of it. So we were seen as having no value for labor. And it was the viewpoint was, let's give the minimum amount of resources here, like a pig pen, to raise this child. And then at 10 or 12 years old, it can serve as labor for us. So until we were a vessel of labor, we were penned in warehouse to grow our bodies. And I'm being as literal as I can.
So is this still going on, and can Child Protective Services do anything about it?
It's such a great question, because one of the things I talk about in the book is I was in the largest FBI raid in history at the age of 7 years old, where Scientology had infiltrated the government in the largest domestic spying campaign in US history. That FBI raid exonerated a Holocaust survivor who the church, or if you want to call it a church, the institution or organization had framed for bomb threats, and she was about to go to federal prison. So I was awoken at midnight and kept awake all night and moved around the main big blue building that you see in Hollywood. We were in dorms across the street as FBI agents flooded into the building. So I don't know if I answered the question there, but what was the question?
Child Protective Services.
Oh, yeah. So, it's an interesting thing. When the FBI left, it was a 24-hour raid, I believe. They didn't bat an eye on what was happening to us and just left us in those conditions and left us with that treatment. When I was taking the bus around Los Angeles, so this was going on under the noses of law enforcement, from the time I was a kid, in the 70s. I was taking the bus by the time I was 7. And if I was on Hollywood Boulevard or on Griffith Park, there were times I didn't have to work, or I could get away from labor. I was forced to do child labor at a very young age. But if I was trying to escape and take the bus to Griffith Park or hike to the Hollywood sign or something like that, and a cop saw this little kid walking down the street or in the park by themselves, they would pull over or come up to me and they say, why are you not in school? What are you doing? And I would just have to say the word Scientology and they would get in their car and leave.
Jesus, man, it's so weird. Yeah. The control that some groups have inside this country just by like bullying and intimidating everyone else. It's nuts. All right,
and by safe pointing, they hire ex-cops and retired cops. I've heard in the last year and a half this has been stopped, but for the last 30 years, they've hired retired cops and off-duty cops and paid them well to do security at their events. They hold an event at the Celebrity Center on Franklin and Bronson, the Artist Center, where they donate, called Christmas Stories, where all these celebrities that are Scientologists show up, and they donate that money to the Police Activities League. I've heard recently that my book is being entered into evidence at the police commission hearings and the public works hearings to some of the top 50 officials in all of Los Angeles.
Wow, interesting. So last two questions about Scientology, then I want to ask you about Trump, and then somehow Armenia is involved. So what are thetans?
A thetan is just the Scientology name for a soul. It's the spirit.
And so you clear your thetan or no?
Well, I mean, it's a complicated thing. So you asked a really good question, either like, have we ever seen it clear? And we haven't seen it clear. So when people still were messed up after becoming clear, and Hubbard was still messed up, he did these things called these advanced levels, the advanced kind of operating levels. He called them, the OT levels, the operating thetan levels, as you say, or thetan levels. And basically, these are confidential levels where you, the reason you still have all these issues after being a clear is because your body is covered in degraded alien souls that were brought here 75 million years ago on these planes from another overpopulated galaxy and blown up in volcanoes. And they're wandering around kind of drunk and out of it. And they attach themselves to your body. And on the upper levels of Scientology, after clear, you're literally auditing. You're doing this, they call it, you're doing this form of counseling on a machine. And it is to help you clear these spirits. I think that's what you're referring to, and that all these levels are confidential in Scientology, and I would say 95% of Scientologists have no idea about them, but it's all been on South Park. And also, we're taught that if we look at these levels before we do all the steps before, that we will spin out of our bodies and die. If we find out about these secrets about getting rid of these body spirits that attach to us and make us crazy, if we find out early without going through all the steps, we will spin out of our bodies and die. I think 20 to 100 million people have seen South Park, and what's on there is pretty accurate, and they're all alive. So I think we're safe.
It is remarkable to get people to believe that. That is just amazing. The human mind is so malleable. So then that leads to the last question, which is, how did you get out? At the age of 19, you're illiterate, can't read or write. You've been brainwashed into this nonsense, but when people get brainwashed into something, it is very, very difficult to get out of it. You believe that it's real usually, right? How did you escape?
Well, that's really what Child X is about. I mean, it's about, child abuse and illiteracy and being in the darkest place. It's really a book I wrote for people, for humanity. It's about, can you be in the darkest place of human existence and still come back? As a teenager, I was stationed all over the world. I was in Canada, I was in Copenhagen, Denmark, I was in southern England at the compound there, and I was in central Florida. Neil Gaiman, he grew up a generation ahead of me in the compound in southern England. Most people don't even know this. In his early 20s, Neil Gaiman was the executive director of their organization in Birmingham. So he went through this stuff. He was a little older when they started the Sea Organization, but he went through this stuff. But I had been sent to punishment on their boat, where I had been forced to go to the engine room and clean a bilge. You can't clean a bilge in an engine because it always fills with oil. It's a Sisyphean task that is a form of punishment. I was kept in this engine room for a week or two until I got heat prostration and ended up in the infirmary. And then eventually, and when I graduated out of the engine room for doing well, they wouldn't let me leave because I wasn't getting a good enough product. I wasn't cleaning good enough. Then the guy that ran the engine room realized that I needed glasses and he let me out. And then I was in Potland cleaning pots in this crew galley, staring at a pot out a portal. What do you call it? One of those ship holes, and staring at the ocean outside of Aruba and Curacao. And I'll never forget flying in for punishment. I'm flying into Aruba and all these people are partying, they're getting it for vacation. And I know that I'm about to be suffering in a very, very severe way in the Caribbean. I vowed when I was cleaning pots, staring at that porthole, that I would never go back if they were going to send me back. A few months later, I was going to be sent back for something that, it's a punishment culture. So you're always in trouble for something. And I had to literally escape. And I describe all of this in the book, but I put all my belongings in a bed sheet, pretended I was going to do my laundry. I was at a compound now that is gated. I wouldn't be able to do this today because it's highly secure, but there was always cabs there to take people to the Fort Harrison Hotel, which was the main building where people worked. And I just was pretending that I was doing my laundry. And when I saw a second with nobody around, I had this white sack with everything I owned in it, including a small stereo and all my CDs. And I ran to a cab and I changed cabs 4 or 5 times before going into a hotel in downtown Tampa and calling a relative to see what my options were. So it was a harrowing escape because they track you.
That's crazy. Did you ever see the show Severance?
I've seen episodes of it.
Because
and a lot of Scientologists tell me, of people that were involved, former people, how people that were involved tell me that there's parallels that are crazy.
Yeah, like the punishments, the Sisyphean tasks, the mind-numbing irrationality of it, etc. Yeah, as you were describing it, reminded me that Scientology is almost like the severed floor of the planet. Super interesting. Now, tell me.
And there are kids. This is still happening to kids. They're not babies like me. They don't let little small children anymore. But there could be kids as young as 14 to 16 in there, where this kind of treatment is happening to them. Yes, to this day, right under the noses of the Los Angeles Police Department and Child Protective Services, and they're protected by the First Amendment religious protections. And I'm very lucky because I left not being able to use a comma at 19 years old, and 5.5 years later, through just a miraculous set of events, I graduated from the London School of Economics. So the story has a happy ending, and now I'm, the author of 6 books, and I consult all over the world.
Yeah, that is amazing, which we're going to get to in a sec. So, all right, so tell me how Trump's connected to Scientologists.
Well, one thing that's amazing, and this is, what I try to do in my book, because I didn't want to write it. I've been living in shame, almost a double life up until 2 years ago when I agreed to do this, I would hide it. My agents didn't know, my speaking agent didn't know, my publishers didn't know. I had to do this kind of walk of shame where I called all of my people and told them about this when I decided I wanted to speak out. But one of the things when I was stationed in Central Florida at their mecca of where all the wealthy public from around the world go, the people from around the world go and do the high level advanced counseling where they remove the body spirits. You would be shocked, Cenk, at who you see there. You see Gottfried Helnwein, one of the most famous artists in the world, doctors, lawyers. Greta Van Susteren is a level 8 Scientologist.
Really?
And back in yes, she is. And back in those days, there was a guy there, and again, you would see these geniuses. I mean, physics professors, Chick Corea, right? Like really talented jazz musicians. And you would say, and I would say to myself, because I was starting to really feel like a slave when I was about 18 and a half. I was feeling like a slave. I got 3 hours of sleep at night. I was overworked. I mean, it was just relentless. And I thought, I'm a slave. But I was working at the place where their most elite and wealthy public went, called the Sandcastle in Clearwater, Florida, which is a small town they've taken over. And there was a guy that would be in the office who was high level, who now is Greta Van Susteren's husband, a very famous lawyer named John Cole, who was very nice to me. And I would look at him and how smart he was. And I would say, if this is BS, because I was an illiterate kid, and I would say, if this is BS, he wouldn't be here. And again, this was a nice guy who was kind to me. So I was shocked, a couple of years ago when I read that he settled the Meta lawsuit, the Facebook lawsuit for Trump, because they kicked him off for $25 million. And then, I don't know, 6 months, a year later, I could have the timeline wrong, he was made deputy envoy to Ukraine.
So a Scientologist that represented Trump and got him $25 million is now our envoy to Ukraine, but it's not like there's a war going on in Ukraine that could lead to World War III. It's not like an important country or anything.
Yeah, and I don't know, again, I like John Cole. He was very kind to me. I've never known him to be an unkind person. I just don't know what his geopolitical qualifications are. I was just invited by the state of Armenia, by the Public Council of Armenia, to present work that I've done on trauma is actually a biological injury. It's not a disorder. And I wrote a book on it with a scientist, a doctor, and I got invited by Armenia to come and present to their ministries of health and ministries of social reform and their top physicians, psychologists, and psychiatrists. And I was just there a couple of weeks ago, presenting this work and learning about and realizing how little I knew about the geopolitics of Armenia.
So why did they invite you to talk about trauma in particular in Armenia?
Because I wrote a book about that's endorsed by some of the top neuroscientists in the world, including Stephen Porges, the trauma chair at the Kinsey Institute, and Dr. Daniel Amen, a famous psychiatrist named Frank Ochberg, who defined Stockholm Syndrome for the FBI in the 1970s. He made the clinical diagnosis of Stockholm Syndrome. So about this treatment that can reset the sympathetic nervous system over a day or two. And I found out about this treatment right around the time that I'd been invited to give a speech at JFK Auditorium at Fort Bragg for Special Forces. So I've had kind of a crazy life. I've gone from where I started as a slave, illiterate, and then I was, a few years ago, at Fort Bragg, teaching Special Forces about communication, doing private workshops and lectures with Special Forces psychological operations on how to create better counter propaganda against the Russians and the Chinese.
Wow. But I am back to the envoy guy.
Yeah.
I'm blown away by the fact that, like, I know Greta Van Susteren like a tiny bit. We've run into each other a couple of times. We've agreed, we've disagreed, etc. Seemingly perfectly rational. I assume that her husband's perfectly rational because he's winning $25 million lawsuit. That one was a little bit easy. Men kind of wanted to pay him off, but anyway. But they function in the world. They function perfectly fine in the world. Yet they believe there are alien creatures glommed onto their body. And then they have to tell their darkest secrets to some Scientologist dude to take the aliens off of them so they can get more clear, so that they can handle this planet, this prison planet, and save it from the aliens or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, return us all to our native godlike state. We can drop the meat body and return to being gods again, and where we can create civilizations. I mean, we have godlike powers. At the very young age, and I was getting indoctrinated at 4 or 5 years old with the stuff that John Cole or Greta would have been indoctrinated with on, early on you do these things called, they're non-reactionary drills called training routines where you practice not reacting. And back then, I've heard they've changed it. They would force me to sit in a chair with my eyes closed at 5 years old for an hour and a half without moving. And when I didn't move and I was perfectly still, I would pass. And then they forced me to do that staring at someone. And back then, I've heard this has changed. You weren't allowed to blink. And then you do a drill where later on where people are insulting you. Every kind of sexual, disgusting, anti-Semitic, anything that will get you to lose your stuff. If you're a Jew, it might be anti-Semitic. If you're a Muslim, it might be anti-Islamic. Anything you get to lose it. And every time you lose it, you fail. So you basically practice not reacting. Well, when you do that, it systematically from what I've observed, it systematically removes empathy. And that's why people walked right by us every day, wealthy and famous members of this group, going to do their counseling, going to do their classes. They walked by kids in rags, not in school, and didn't think twice.
That's why they take the emotion out of the person, so they don't feel sympathy for the others that are first getting trained through this brutal process.
Yeah, and then you do a drill called objectives, which is where you're basically for dozens, if not hundreds of hours, you let someone walk you around and control you. And they're telling you you're doing this because to control your environment or others better, you have to be able to be willing to be controlled. But really, you're being groomed and conditioned to be controlled. These are two of the first things that you do when you go into Scientology, which I even hate to call it that because it's just a series of maggoty constructs that have destroyed my family and made my life incredibly difficult. But Hubbard was a hypnotist, and one of his definitions of hypnotism was truth, 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 lie. Truth, 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 lie. And I talk about this in the book. So there's lots of stuff in there that you can use right away. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld talks about doing the communication course in the 70s and it really helping him. So there are lots of things early on that are really, really useful. And then when you're conditioned to those things and they're really good, workable, usable things, and then he enters something weird, you kind of accept it.
Yeah, I get it. God, that is a fascinating story. All right, apparently everybody's got to check out Child X because that is a super trippy story. I'm really glad we had this conversation so I could understand it better. I'm sorry that you went through that experience, but wow, to do London School of Economics and write all these books and be an expert after not having learned how to read or write till you're 19. That's amazing. Jamie Mustard, thank you, brother, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, it has a happy ending, Cenk. And thank you for having me. I've watched you for a long time and I love your show.
Oh, thank you, brother. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
Okay. Thank you.